In today's video, I'm going to be looking into the history behind daylight saving and why some countries do and don't practice it, as well as why starting in 2023, the United States may make the change permanent. Alright, so with that, if you're interested in any of the world's strange and not so strange events, then feel free to stick around, because I post videos just like this one once roughly every 2 weeks. Let's get into it. So why does daylight saving exist? Why? In order to answer that question, I think it might be useful to briefly look back on the history of daylight saving. The story of daylight saving originated in the year 1905 when an Englishman by the name of William Willett was horseback riding in the early morning hours in the outskirts of London. While horseback riding, he thought to himself, man, it's such a nice day out, but all these people are sleeping in, missing out on all the sunshine, in an English accent, of course. So in 1907, William published a brochure titled A Waste of Daylight, in which he stated the reasons why the United Kingdom should set their clocks forward by an hour and 20 minutes between the months of April and October. Much of his reasoning being that if these changes were implemented, people would have a bit of extra time to go about and enjoy the sunlight, and do what English people do, like horseback riding, drinking tea, and playing football. I'm kidding, please don't cancel me. So William actually spent a lot of his time campaigning for this change to be implemented, and his brochure is actually very detailed. It's also written in English from the early 20th century, so it's a little bit tough to read, at least for me, but if you'd like to read it all for yourself, I'll put the link in the description. Unfortunately, his proposals didn't get very far since the British Parliament ended up not passing an act to implement this new system. But on April 30th, 1916, the German Empire adopted daylight saving as a way to conserve electricity. And for those of you who don't know, Germany was at war with the United Kingdom at the time in a little known event known as World War I. So naturally, the UK didn't want their enemy to get all the thunder for this new innovative system, so just a few weeks later, the UK also adopted this new daylight saving system. Then, when the United States entered World War I in 1918, they also adopted daylight saving as a way to save on electricity as well. I'd also like to point out something that I just found out. It's actually more grammatically correct to say daylight saving as opposed to daylight savings, plural. So do with that what you will. Fast forward to today, in 2022, around 70 countries on Earth practice daylight saving, including the United Kingdom and the United States. Also, interestingly enough, most countries along the equator don't practice daylight saving because along the equator, there isn't a significant difference in daytime hours with the changing of the seasons that countries farther into the northern and southern hemispheres experience. The main argument as to why daylight savings is practiced is the same as it's been for decades, to save energy. Now, an interesting thing about daylight saving in the United States is that so far 29 states have actually made the time change permanent by way of their local state governments, meaning that they don't cycle their clocks forward then backward again throughout the year. But just a couple weeks before writing this video, in early March of 2022, a bill introduced by Florida Senator Marco Rubio in 2018 called the Sunshine Protection Act was reintroduced last year in 2021 in a bid to make the forward shift of the clock permanent nationwide, and is currently making its way to the House of Representatives, where it may or may not be approved. Not only would the change remove the need to reset your clock twice a year, but some other benefits outlined by this bill describe improvements in individual health, since for many people, the back and forth shift of the clock in the current system creates a disruption in their sleep cycles that people need to readjust to every half of the year, which could in turn negatively impact a person's health and could be indirectly responsible for some traffic accidents caused by complications due to lack of sleep. Also, making daylight saving time permanent could reduce seasonal depression. For example, speaking as somebody from the Midwest, you know how in the winter, later in the day, it gets darker super early on in the evening, and you just get that gloomy feeling? Well, winter's my favorite season, and I don't even like that. Well, daylight saving time would shift the clock so the sun would rise at roughly 8 a.m. and set at 5:30 p.m. in the winter, as opposed to sunrise at 7 a.m. and sunset at 4:30 p.m. Another benefit would be to the average social lives of Americans, with the permanent change allowing families to enjoy an extra hour of sunlight at the end of the day. Maybe by having a picnic at the park, going window shopping, or maybe just having an extra hour at their favorite restaurant. Also, in states where permanent daylight saving has already been implemented, it's reported that rates in crimes like robberies were noticeably reduced due to the extra visibility from the sun at the end of the day. On top of that, added benefits would also include the economy, since the added amount of daylight would likely encourage people to go out more and result in an increase in consumer spending. An example of this for me would be, say it's later on in the evening and I want to go to the store, but the sun sets in roughly an hour, so I'll likely be driving back home in the dark. Daylight savings would shift the clock, so there would be an extra hour of daylight for me to go ahead and go to the store in the cover of daylight without worrying about possibly hitting a deer in the dark on the way home. And that's just a very specific example which may not apply to everyone. So in summary, daylight saving was adopted mainly as a way to conserve energy by making daylight hours more prominent, as well as to improve the work and social lives of everyday people. And today, there are currently efforts to make daylight saving time a permanent measure, to include all of the benefits without the need to reset our clocks twice a year. Hey there, thank you so much for sticking around. If you found this video interesting, consider subscribing and hitting the bell button to be notified of new videos just like this one that I post roughly once every 2 weeks. Alright, well with that, I hope you have a great day, and goodbye. Oh, come on. Janky teleprompter. Also, interestingly enough, most countries during the... Oh, whoops. That countries farther into the northern and southern... Oh my gosh. And is currently making its way... to the House of Representatives. Well, daylight saving time would